story of Gaius Julius Caesar does not begin with an empire. It begins with an experiment known as the Roman Republic. For nearly 5 centuries, Rome was governed not by kings but by laws, by a senate, and by a delicate balance of power designed specifically to prevent any single man from ruling supreme. But by the 1st century BCE, this experiment was fracturing. Beneath the grand marble facades of the Forum lay a society strained by rapid territorial expansion, extreme wealth inequality, and a political system increasingly vulnerable to the personal ambitions of its military commanders. The Republic was not a monolith of stability. It was a structure shaking under the weight of civil unrest, street violence, and the quiet threat of military intervention. It was into this volatile world, in the year 100 BCE, that Gaius Julius Caesar was born. His life would not only parallel the decline of the Republic, but his choices would ultimately dismantle it, paving the way for a system of imperial rule that would shape the Western world for centuries to come. Caesar was born into the patrician family of the Julii, an ancient noble line that claimed descent from Julius, the son of the Trojan hero Aeneas, and through him, Venus, the goddess of love. Despite this prestigious lineage, however, the Julii were neither exceptionally wealthy nor politically dominant at the time of Caesar's birth. They lived in the Subura, a densely populated, noisy, and often dangerous neighborhood of Rome, far removed from the luxurious estates of the patrician elite on the Palatine Hill. In a city where political influence required substantial financial resources and strategic alliances, noble blood alone did not guarantee a successful career. It merely provided a starting point. From his earliest years, Caesar's environment was defined by intense political instability. The Roman political landscape was divided between 2 loose factions: the Optimates, who sought to preserve the traditional power of the Senate and the conservative aristocracy, and the Populares, who utilized the popular assemblies and advocated for reforms such as land redistribution and grain subsidies to appeal to the common citizens. Caesar's family was closely tied to the Populares. His aunt, Julia, was married to Gaius Marius, a brilliant general and 7-time consul who championed the popular faction. Marius's military reforms had transformed the Roman army from a citizen militia into a professional fighting force, but they also created a dangerous precedent. Soldiers became more loyal to their individual generals, who promised them land and wealth, than to the Roman state itself. This shift in loyalty became starkly apparent when Caesar was still a teenager. A fierce rival of Marius, the conservative general Lucius Cornelius Sulla, marched his own legions onto the streets of Rome to seize power. This unprecedented violation of Roman law marked the beginning of a reign of terror. Sulla declared himself dictator and initiated the proscriptions, lists of political enemies who were declared outlaws. Anyone on these lists could be killed without trial, and their property was confiscated by the state. The streets of Rome became hunting grounds. Because of his family connections to Marius, the young Caesar was immediately placed in a precarious position. This vulnerability deepened when Caesar married Cornelia, the daughter of Lucius Cornelius Cinna, another prominent leader of the Populares and Sulla's late enemy. Sulla viewed this marriage as a defiance of his authority and ordered Caesar to divorce Cornelia. It was a moment that could have ended Caesar's career before it truly began. Most young men in Rome would have obeyed the dictator to secure their survival and social standing. Caesar, however, refused. This act of defiance nearly cost Caesar his life. Stripped of his inheritance, his priesthood, and his wife's dowry, he was forced to flee Rome. He went into hiding in the Sabine Hills, constantly changing locations, suffering from malaria, and bribing Sulla's agents to avoid capture. Eventually, influential friends and family members, including the Vestal Virgins, interceded on his behalf. Sulla reluctantly pardoned him, though historical accounts suggest the dictator warned those who pleaded for Caesar's life. noting that in this young man there were many Mariuses. This early experience left an enduring impression on Caesar. He learned firsthand that in Rome, traditional laws and ancient lineage were secondary to the raw possession of power. Survival, let alone success, required adaptability, resolve, and the ability to navigate a system where the threat of violence was ever present. Following Sulla's death in 78 BCE, Caesar returned to Rome. Realizing that he still lacked the political and financial capital to compete directly in the capital, he chose to develop another essential skill for any aspiring Roman politician: public speaking. In the Roman Republic, power was wielded through persuasion. A senator had to be capable of swaying the courts, convincing the public, and debating his peers in the Senate. To refine his oratorical style, Caesar set sail for Rhodes, a renowned center of learning, to study under Apollonius Molon, the same master of rhetoric who had instructed Rome's greatest orator, Marcus Tullius Cicero. But the journey to Rhodes did not go as planned. In the early 70s BCE, the Mediterranean was plagued by piracy, particularly from Cilician fleets that operated with relative impunity. While crossing the Aegean Sea, Caesar's ship was intercepted, and the young noble was taken prisoner near the island of Pharmacusa. The pirates, recognizing his aristocratic background, demanded a ransom of 20 talents of silver, a substantial sum at the time. According to historical accounts, Caesar reacted to his capture not with fear, but with an unusual level of self-assurance. When told of the ransom, he reportedly laughed, telling the pirates they did not know who they had captured, and insisted they demand 50 talents instead, as 20 was far too low for a man of his status. For nearly 40 days, Caesar lived among his captors while his associates traveled to raise the funds. Instead of acting as a hostage, he treated the pirates as his subordinates. He wrote poems and speeches, reciting them to the pirates, and openly insulted them as illiterate barbarians when they failed to appreciate his work. He participated in their games and exercises, and when he wished to sleep, he demanded they remain quiet. Throughout his captivity, he repeatedly told them, in what they assumed was a joke, that once he was freed, he would return, raise a fleet, and crucify them all. The pirates took these threats as light-hearted bravado. They were mistaken. As soon as the 50 talents were delivered and Caesar was released at the port of Miletus, he immediately began requisitioning ships and recruiting soldiers, despite holding no official public or military office. He surprised the pirates at their anchorage, captured the majority of them, and seized their plunder along with his own ransom money. He brought the prisoners to the governor of Asia, Marcus Junius Silanus, to decide their punishment. When Silanus hesitated, eyeing the potential wealth of the prisoners and suggesting he would sell them into slavery later, Caesar departed and took matters into his own hands. He returned to the prison and ordered his men to crucify the pirates himself. In a small gesture of mercy, reflecting his pragmatic approach to violence, he ordered their throats slit before they were nailed to the crosses to spare them a prolonged agony. This episode illustrated a defining trait of Caesar's character: a firm belief in his own authority, combined with a willingness to act decisively, even outside the bounds of traditional legal structures, to achieve his objectives. Upon returning to Rome, Caesar began his steady ascent up the cursus honorum, the traditional ladder of Roman political offices. He served as a military tribune, and in 69 BCE, he was elected quaestor, a financial administrator, which secured him a permanent seat in the Senate. That same year, his wife Cornelia and his aunt Julia both passed away. Caesar used their funerals as political opportunities. He delivered moving eulogies in the Forum, and in a bold move, displayed the images of Marius during his aunt's funeral procession, a direct challenge to the remaining conservative faction that had supported Sulla. In 65 BCE, Caesar was elected aedile, the official responsible for public buildings, roads, and games. He understood a fundamental reality of late Roman politics. To win high office, one needed the support of the popular assemblies, and the most reliable way to secure that support was through lavish public entertainment. Caesar organized massive gladiatorial combats, public feasts, and theatrical performances, even displaying hundreds of gladiators in silver armor. The scale of these events was unprecedented, and it drove Caesar into massive debt. He borrowed heavily from Rome's wealthiest citizens, most notably Marcus Licinius Crassus, a billionaire who saw Caesar's potential as a political ally and was willing to finance his career to counter his own rivals. This financial risk paid off. In 63 BCE, the position of Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome, became vacant. It was a lifetime appointment of immense prestige and influence, typically reserved for elder, highly distinguished statesmen. Caesar, still relatively young and heavily in debt, ran an aggressive campaign, borrowing even more to bribe the voting tribes. He reportedly told his mother on the morning of the election that he would either return as Pontifex Maximus or never return at all, knowing that a loss would mean financial ruin and political exile. He won by a landslide. By 60 BCE, Caesar had served as praetor and completed a successful term as governor of Farther Spain, where his military campaigns earned him both wealth and the loyalty of his troops. He returned to Rome, aiming for the highest office, the consulship. However, the conservative faction in the Senate, led by figures like Marcus Porcius Cato, known as Cato the Younger, was determined to block his ambitions. Realizing he could not overcome this opposition alone, Caesar orchestrated a secret political alliance that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in Rome, the First Triumvirate. This alliance united three men with distinct forms of influence. Marcus Licinius Crassus was the wealthiest man in Rome, bringing immense financial resources. Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, or Pompey the Great, was Rome's most celebrated general, commanding the loyalty of thousands of veteran soldiers, but facing senatorial resistance to his land, demands for his troops. Gaius Julius Caesar was the rising political star, possessing the charisma, the popular support, and the drive to guide their joint agenda through the assemblies. To seal this alliance, Caesar's young and beloved daughter Julia was married to Pompey, despite their significant age difference. This personal connection solidified what was initially a marriage of political convenience. With their forces combined, the triumvirate was virtually unstoppable. Caesar was elected consul for the year 59 BCE, and he used his office to bypass the Senate entirely, passing land distribution bills and securing favor for his allies through the popular assemblies, often using physical intimidation to silence conservative senators who tried to filibuster. At the end of his year as consul, Caesar was assigned the governorship of Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul, and Illyricum for a 5-year term, later extended to 10. This appointment was a turning point. While the Senate hoped to keep him far from Rome, Caesar saw Gaul as an opportunity to acquire what he lacked compared to Pompey: military glory, a loyal, battle-hardened army, and immense personal wealth through plunder. Over the next 8 years, Caesar waged the Gallic Wars. This series of campaigns was marked by intense brutality, tactical innovation, and significant loss of life. An animated sequence shows Roman legions advancing in disciplined formations against fragmented, charge-based Gallic warriors. Quick shots of Caesar, in his red cloak, riding among his men and shouting orders, are shown. Caesar proved to be an exceptionally capable military commander. He possessed a keen understanding of logistics, speed, and psychology. He frequently marched his army at double time, arriving before his enemies even knew he had mobilized. He shared the hardships of his soldiers, marching on foot alongside them, eating the same rations, and memorizing the names of his centurions. This created a profound bond of loyalty. His legions became extensions of his own will. He subdued tribe after tribe, the Helvetii, the Belgae, the Nervii, He crossed the Rhine River by constructing a massive wooden bridge in just 10 days, demonstrating Roman engineering prowess to the Germanic tribes, and then dismantled it after marching across. He launched 2 expeditions to Britain, lands largely mysterious to the Roman world. By 52 BCE, however, Roman control over Gaul was threatened. A young Arverni chieftain named Vercingetorix achieved what many thought impossible. He united the historically fractured Gallic tribes in a coordinated rebellion against Rome. Vercingetorix utilized scorched earth tactics, destroying crops and towns to deprive Caesar's legions of supplies while avoiding direct open-field battles. The decisive confrontation occurred at the hilltop fortress of Alesia. Vercingetorix and some 80,000 of his warriors withdrew into the town, hoping to hold out until a massive relief force could arrive to crush the Romans from behind. Caesar, with roughly 60,000 men, faced a complex tactical challenge. He could not storm the fortress directly, nor could he afford to be trapped between the besieged Gauls and the oncoming relief army. His solution was a notable feat of military engineering. He constructed 2 concentric lines of fortifications. The inner wall, the line of circumvallation, was 11 miles long and designed to keep Vercingetorix trapped inside Alesia. The outer wall, the line of contravallation, was 14 miles long, facing outward to defend the Roman army from the expected Gallic relief force. Between these walls, Caesar's men dug deep trenches, filled them with water, and scattered concealed traps, wooden stakes, and iron spikes. The relief army arrived, numbering over 200,000 Gauls. For days, the Romans fought on 2 fronts, defending their positions against simultaneous attacks from the besieged forces inside and the massive relief army outside. At a critical moment, when the outer line was on the verge of collapsing, Caesar personally led his cavalry reserves out of the fortifications to attack the Gauls from the rear. The maneuver succeeded. The Gallic relief force broke and scattered. The following day, Vercingetorix surrendered. He rode out of Alesia in armor, circled the seated Caesar, and threw his weapons at the general's feet. The Gallic rebellion was over. Gaul was conquered, and its territory was integrated into the Roman world. For Caesar, the campaign was a success, but it came at a high cost. Hundreds of thousands of Gauls were killed, and equal numbers were sold into slavery. In Rome, the news of his victories was met with public celebrations, but in the Senate, it was viewed with deep anxiety. Caesar now possessed an army of veterans loyal to him alone, along with the wealth of an entire conquered province. The balance of power had shifted. While Caesar was in Gaul, the political foundations of Rome shifted. The first triumvirate, which had dominated politics for a decade, slowly disintegrated. In 54 BCE, Caesar's daughter Julia died in childbirth, severing the personal bond between Caesar and Pompey. In 53 BCE, Crassus was killed at the Battle of Carrhae in the east, removing the 3rd player who had balanced the ambitions of the other 2. Without Crassus and Julia, Pompey and Caesar drifted apart. The conservative faction in the Senate, recognizing Pompey's traditionalist leanings and his growing fear of Caesar's popularity, moved to bring Pompey into their camp. They presented Pompey as the defender of the Republic against the potential tyranny of Caesar. As Caesar's governorship neared its end, the Senate demanded that he disband his legions and return to Rome as a private citizen to stand trial for alleged illegal acts committed during his consulship. Caesar knew that entering Rome without the protection of his military command or a political office would leave him vulnerable to prosecution and political ruin by his enemies. He offered a compromise. He would lay down his command if Pompey did the same. The Senate refused. In January of 49 BCE, the Senate issued the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, the ultimate decree, declaring Caesar an enemy of the state and directing Pompey to defend the Republic. Caesar found himself at a crossroads. He was stationed with his 13th Legion at the Rubicon, a small river that marked the boundary between his province of Cisalpine Gaul and the territory of Italy proper. Under Roman law, any general who crossed this boundary with an armed force was automatically guilty of high treason. To cross was to start a civil war. To remain was to accept political ruin. According to the historian Suetonius, Caesar hesitated for some time at the riverbank, contemplating the consequences of his choice. He turned to his officers and remarked that if they did not cross, it would be the beginning of misfortunes for him, but if they did, it would bring misfortune to all mankind. Finally, Caesar made his decision. He led his army across the river, reportedly uttering the phrase, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. With those words, the Roman Republic entered its final destructive civil war. It was a choice born not of a desire to destroy Rome, but of a refusal to accept political irrelevance. For Caesar, his personal honor, his dignitas, was worth risking the future of the state. Caesar's decision to cross the Rubicon caught his opponents unprepared. Expecting Caesar to take time gathering his forces, Pompey and the majority of the Senate were surprised by the speed of his advance. Lacking sufficient troops in Italy to defend Rome, Pompey made the strategic decision to evacuate the capital, retreating to Greece to consolidate his forces and leverage the vast resources of Rome's eastern provinces. Caesar entered Rome without a fight, secured the state treasury, and immediately took steps to stabilize the city. He then launched a rapid campaign to secure his western flank, defeating Pompey's loyalist legions in Spain in just 40 days before turning his attention to Greece. The decisive confrontation occurred in 48 BCE at the Battle of Pharsalus in central Greece. Pompey's army was significantly larger, outnumbering Caesar's tired legions nearly 2-1. Pompey also held a superior cavalry force, which he planned to use to sweep around Caesar's flank and crush his line from behind. Caesar anticipated this maneuver. He placed a select group of veteran infantrymen in a hidden fourth line, angled to protect his right flank. He instructed them not to throw their javelins as was traditional, but to use them as spears, thrusting directly at the faces of Pompey's young, aristocratic horsemen. The tactic worked. The cavalry retreated in confusion, exposing Pompey's infantry flank to Caesar's veterans. The battle ended in a decisive victory for Caesar. Despite the intense civil war, Caesar ordered his men to spare fleeing Roman citizens and offered amnesty to those who surrendered, demonstrating a policy of clemency that he hoped would help reunite the fractured state under his leadership. Pompey escaped the battlefield and fled to Egypt, hoping to find refuge and support from the young king, Ptolemy XIII. However, Egypt's advisors, anxious to avoid embroiling their kingdom in Rome's civil war and calculating that Caesar's victory was assured, decided to act. When Pompey stepped ashore, he was assassinated. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria shortly after, he was presented with Pompey's severed head. According to historical accounts, Caesar did not celebrate. Instead, he wept and turned away in disgust. Pompey had been his son-in-law, a fellow consul, and one of Rome's most celebrated generals. To see him killed by foreign courtiers was a stark reminder of how far the Roman world had fallen into internal conflict. Caesar chose to remain in Egypt, where he became involved in a civil war for the Ptolemaic throne between the young King Ptolemy XIII and his older sister, Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra, recognizing that her survival depended on securing Roman support, smuggled herself into the palace in Alexandria, traditionally described as being wrapped in a bed sack or linen bundle, to present her case directly to Caesar. Caesar was impressed by her intelligence, her political ambition, and her strategic vision. Their alliance became both political and personal. Caesar supported Cleopatra in the Alexandrian War, defeating the forces of Ptolemy XIII and securing her position as the sole ruler of Egypt. She later gave birth to a son, Caesarion, whom she claimed was Caesar's child, though Caesar never officially recognized him in his will, keeping his focus on Rome. After brief but decisive campaigns in Asia Minor, where he quickly defeated the rebellious King Pharnaces of Pontus, summarizing the campaign with the words Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. And campaigns in North Africa and Spain against the remaining senatorial forces. Caesar returned to Rome as the undisputed master of the Roman world. He was celebrated with 4 grand triumphs, representing his victories over Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, and Africa. He used his position of absolute authority to initiate a series of sweeping reforms aimed at addressing the structural issues that had plagued the Republic for decades. To his supporters, Caesar was restoring order to a collapsing system. To his critics, however, these reforms were proof that he was dismantling the traditional republic. By appointing his own supporters to key positions, he effectively bypassed the traditional Republican offices, centralizing decision-making around himself. In February of 44 BCE, Caesar was named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. This title was a significant departure from Roman tradition. The office of dictator had historically been a temporary, emergency measure, lasting no more than 6 months. To accept the position permanently was to signal that the traditional republic was not returning. Whispers began to circulate through the city that Caesar wished to be crowned king, a title that had been loathed in Rome since the expulsion of Tarquin the Proud 5 centuries earlier. At the festival of the Lupercalia, Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal lieutenant, publicly offered him a diadem, a royal crown. Although Caesar refused it to the cheers of the crowd, his critics suspected the entire event was a staged test of public opinion. For a faction of senators, Caesar's permanent dictatorship was an existential threat to the Republic. They believed that by killing him, they could restore the traditional constitution and preserve the liberty of Rome's senatorial class. A conspiracy began to form, led by Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus's involvement was symbolically significant. He was a descendant of Lucius Junius Brutus, who had led the expulsion of Rome's last king in 509 BCE. Brutus had also been pardoned by Caesar after Pharsalus and had been treated with personal affection by him. His participation gave the conspiracy an air of ideological purpose rather than personal resentment. On the night of March 14th, 44 BCE, various omens were reported throughout Rome. Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, dreamed of his death and begged him not to attend the Senate meeting scheduled for the following morning. The Ides of March. Caesar, who was in poor health and preparing to depart for a major military campaign against the Parthian Empire, initially agreed to stay home. However, Decimus Brutus, one of the conspirators whom Caesar trusted, visited him and convinced him that staying home would be seen as an insult to the Senate, who were waiting to vote on his provincial commands. Caesar walked into the theater of Pompey, where the Senate was meeting that day. As he took his seat, the conspirators gathered around him under the pretense of presenting a petition on behalf of the exiled brother of one of their members, Tullius Cimber. Cimber grabbed Caesar's toga, pulling it down from his neck, the signal for the attack to begin. The conspirators drew their daggers. Casca struck the first blow, grazing Caesar's shoulder. Caesar turned and defended himself, but he was quickly surrounded by a circle of blades. According to the historian Suetonius, when Caesar saw Marcus Brutus among his attackers, he uttered his final words in Greek, "Kai su teknon," "You too, my child," expressing his sense of betrayal. Stabbed 23 times, Caesar fell to the floor, fittingly at the base of a statue of his old rival, Pompey the Great. The conspirators had believed that by assassinating Caesar, the Republic would naturally restore itself. They expected the Roman public to celebrate their action as a liberation from tyranny. They were mistaken. Instead of celebration, the city was gripped by panic and confusion. Many senators fled, and citizens locked themselves in their homes. The situation escalated during Caesar's public funeral. Mark Antony, as consul, delivered a funeral oration. He read Caesar's will, which revealed that Caesar had left a significant sum of money to every individual Roman citizen and had willed his private gardens to the public. Antony then lifted Caesar's blood-stained toga, showing the crowd the stab wounds. The crowd's mood shifted from grief to anger. They rioted, using wooden benches, tables, and platform railings from the forum to build a funeral pyre for Caesar's body. They then hunted for the conspirators, forcing Brutus, Cassius, and the others to flee the capital for their safety. From this instability emerged a new figure, Gaius Octavius, Caesar's 18-year-old great-nephew. In his will, Caesar had posthumously adopted Octavius as his son and named him his primary heir. Despite his youth and lack of political experience, the young man, now calling himself Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, returned to Rome to claim his inheritance. Octavian proved to be a calculating politician. He secured the support of Caesar's veteran soldiers who were eager to see their commander's death avenged. Realizing they needed to unite to defeat the conspirators, Octavian, Mark Antony, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate in 43 BCE. Unlike the first, this was an official, legally recognized alliance, granting them near absolute power over the Roman state. They began their rule with a new round of proscriptions, executing hundreds of senators and equestrians to eliminate political rivals and raise funds for their armies. Among the victims was Cicero, who was executed on Antony's orders for his vocal opposition. In 42 BCE, the triumvirs crossed into Greece and defeated the forces of Brutus and Cassius at the Battle of Philippi. With their defeat, both Brutus and Cassius took their own lives, ending the armed resistance of the self-proclaimed liberators. The Republic was gone. The fight was no longer between the Republic and a dictator, but over which of the victors would rule the Roman world. With their enemies defeated, the triumvirs divided the Roman territories among themselves. Lepidus was assigned the provinces of North Africa, but was soon politically sidelined by his colleagues. Octavian took control of the western provinces, including Italy and Rome itself, while Antony assumed command of the wealthy eastern provinces. In the east, Antony met Cleopatra VII. Their alliance, like Caesar's before, was both personal and political. Antony relied on Egypt's wealth to finance his eastern military campaigns, while Cleopatra sought to secure her dynasty's position. Their relationship soon became a romance, and Antony took up residence in Alexandria, fathering 3 children with Cleopatra. This situation provided Octavian with a political opportunity. He launched a propaganda campaign in Rome, presenting Antony as a man who had abandoned his Roman heritage, embraced foreign luxuries, and succumbed to the influence of an Egyptian queen. Octavian argued that Antony wished to move the capital of the empire to Alexandria and divide Roman territories among Cleopatra's children. In 32 BCE, Octavian took the step of securing and reading Antony's will, which had been deposited with the Vestal Virgins. The will confirmed some of these claims, including Antony's wish to be buried in Alexandria alongside Cleopatra. With public opinion firmly behind him, Octavian declared war, not on Antony, but on Cleopatra, framing the conflict as a defense of Rome against a foreign threat. The decisive confrontation took place in 31 BCE at the naval battle of Actium off the western coast of Greece. Octavian's fleet, commanded by his loyal friend and general Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, utilized smaller, more maneuverable vessels to outmaneuver Antony's larger, heavier galleys. During the battle, Cleopatra's squadron of ships broke away and sailed south toward Egypt, and Antony followed her, leaving his fleet and army to surrender to Octavian. In 30 BCE, Octavian's forces advanced on Alexandria. Faced with defeat, Antony took his own life. Cleopatra, failing to reach a political settlement with the victorious Octavian and determined not to be paraded through the streets of Rome in his triumph, also committed suicide. According to tradition, she allowed herself to be bitten by an asp, an Egyptian cobra, though the exact details of her death remain a subject of historical debate. With her death, the Ptolemaic dynasty ended, and Egypt was annexed as a province of the Roman Empire, becoming Octavian's personal possession. Octavian returned to Rome as the sole ruler of the Roman world. He understood that he could not maintain absolute power under the title of dictator, which had cost his adoptive father his life. Instead, in 27 BCE, he staged a restoration of the Republic, returning authority to the Senate and the Roman people, while retaining control of the army and key provinces. In return, the Senate granted him the title Augustus, the revered one. He did not call himself king or dictator, but princeps, first citizen. Behind this republican facade, however, Augustus held absolute authority. He became Rome's first emperor, and his accession marked the formal end of the Roman Republic and the birth of the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar did not live to see this new world, but his life and choices made it possible. His military campaigns had expanded Rome's borders, his administrative reforms centralized control, and his death illustrated that the old republican structures could no longer function in a vast, militarized state. In the end, Caesar did not become a king. Instead, his name itself became a title, Caesar, used by Roman emperors and later adapted by empires across centuries, from the Tsars of Russia to the Kaisers of Germany. He remains a central figure in Western history, the individual who bridged the gap between a declining republic and the rising empire that would define the ancient world.